Hello. This is the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. This is episode 7, A View of Criticism as an Indicator of Societal Health. This is a series of lectures or talks or just discussions that I've kind of started, I guess, in beginning of December. We are now up to number 7, and it's kind of like followed a track through some ideas. I started with the idea of the operation of the metaphor, spoke a little bit about that. That led me to open the idea of unbreakable bonds, which are kind of what I call proto metaphors, or kind of like societal circumstances. They exist as a result of the way in which we kind of like can conceivably move towards a more valuable construct in societal circumstance. Then I went into the idea of criticism, and we've kind of like gone through the series where we had the art of finding what needs to be said, the value and necessity of criticism, and this one is basically a circumstance of the view of criticism as an indicator of societal health. So let's kind of briefly go through that. We talked about the necessity of criticism as something that allows us to be able to take and build upon an idea that we had before, which is the fact that we would kind of take uh, reason and link it to technique, and that was something that had existed in our kind of society, and as a result had a circumstantial value that we could see in terms of the ability to kind of have certain consequential things, like the ability to take, make experiments to kind of look at certain things, evaluate them, and see as if there was some way we could kind of chart progress. And we kind of talked previously about the fact that we have created what I call unbreakable bonds, which are these things where circumstance allow us to kind of create this kind of what I would call kind of like uh, structural metaphors within maybe kind of like society or kind of like intellect. One of them was the fact that at our Western society, we kind of realized that there was a value in linking reason and technique. So that rather that in other times where technique was relatively related to superstition or religion or ritual or some other things that really had limited their ability to kind of advance technique. By having that linked to reason and science, we were able to kind of create circumstances that allowed us to kind of like evaluate and improve, which was something that was of great value. So, as a result of that being something that was kind of one of the cornerstones of kind of like the way in which we progressed, where we kind of started to realize the value of reason, the value of kind of dialogue, the value of discourse, we understood the fact that criticism was a vital aspect. Now, by criticism, I mean making an observation in regards to something in terms of trying to kind of further understand or deepen its understanding, kind of reveal perspectives that would allow us a greater benefit to that particular thing under discussion. So, anybody who's studied architecture, art, engineering, science, any of the speculative fields understands how in the course of your education you will have people evaluate your work, look at the things that you've done, and be able to kind of assess what they, given their experience level of expertise, might possibly be, that they might be able to kind of give you valuable insights. This has been an operation that has kind of like been of great value to us. So I found that we had created, related to this technique reason unbreakable bond, another minor one, which was called criticism and discernment or judgment, which was the fact that if I come to you and I basically say to you that I have made this evaluation of your piece, that it could conceivably be uh, of value to you, that doesn't mean that you have to necessarily assume that that is the case, you have to be able to discern the consequence of the statement yourself. So I make these evaluations as a result of feeling a kind of kinship and a value in kind of evaluating the things that someone has done. Uh, Maybe because I feel it has value to me, or I feel as if that's something that kind of like is a valuable skill. I feel that developing my critical skill maybe allows me to better assess my own work. So that was the second part, was the value and necessity of criticism to the art of finding what needs to be said and saying it. So as a result, then we started to understand that criticism has a consequence, and that assigning that unbreakable bond with discernment or judgment, that once the criticism is leveled, that it's up to the individual to be able to assess for themselves the various merits or lack of merit that any particular uh, observation may have. So we talked about the fact that there are a lot of times that for some reason we as a society, and this is what this part of this talk is about today, which is the societal circumstance and the potential societal uh, uh, ideology or concern with the way in which criticism is seen in society today. So the point is the view of criticism as an indicator of societal health. These unbreakable bonds that we create that become the network and the structure that we use to kind of like discern, structure our society, they are things that we generally find to come across as a result of the fact that someone has made a persuasive argument for the reason why we would, as free will and free thinking individuals, adopt them either personally or societally. So now we have this situation where, as our society moves, it can basically move in a forward direction or a negative direction. And that's something that we have to kind of like learn as well to kind of observe. So, in the case where we have criticism and we understand its essential nature as relates to technique and reason, and in that case, like technical work and technology and science, we see the fact that like studying these things in order to kind of create objects of a greater efficiency has a tremendous benefit, which we weren't capable of doing when we had not had this bond. So now we've seen the benefit, we understand the benefit, but do we understand when we're basically stepping on our own toes? Now, one of the things I talked about was that, like, one of the times that, and this has become kind of a hardship, is that having been an architectural critic and researcher and an architect and a builder, um, I have found over the course of time that it was never an easy thing for a lot of people to prepare themselves for the times when they would be able to be subjected to observation and critique. And I found that there were ways to kind of help people with that. One of them was being able to kind of assess to them the fact that it's important to kind of maybe look at the information and basically separate that from the intent of the individual that delivers it. I think a lot of times people who kind of grow up in kind of somewhat dysfunctional circumstances are subject to derision and ridicule and all kinds of other things that start to kind of give criticism a bad name. Now, we also see the fact that sometimes, on the other hand, what happens is one of the things that kind of usually cuts people wrong way is the truth hurts, as it says. Now, the thing is, the truth hurts only if you've kind of created a separation between yourself and reality. So if you want to kind of say, I'm, I think I'm like 5'9.5". If I say I'm 6 foot tall, and people keep reminding me, it's like, hey man, look, you're 5'9.5". So don't keep telling people you're 6 foot tall. That may be that I have a feeling, I have feelings of inadequacy physically, and it kind of manifests in my sense of my height or whatever. But whatever that is, it basically is something that maybe I need to kind of look at. Hey, why am I doing that? So, and it doesn't mean that again that the things that people say are in themselves correct. That's why criticism has to be finds a valuable partner in judgment or discernment. So that natural skepticism that one can have, it takes with you, and you kind of like listen to what someone says. It's like, no, man, you can trust me. You're like, really? Why? One of the things I kind of find funny is that we kind of live in a society where people are constantly telling us how much we can be, they can be trusted, and how great value there is. And if we were just willing to kind of like, understand and appreciate that they're here to help us. Part of being a New Yorker, part of being an American, is you just don't necessarily just accept that at face value. And it's like, look, you could very well, very conceivably be correct in your assessment. Just explain it to me. I'm an intelligent person. If I don't understand it, let's ask me more questions. But your reluctance becomes suspicion. It will arise suspicion. So anyway, given that, we have this idea that, we have this unbreakable bond, between with reason and technique. And then we see that as something that kind of can show us valuable consequences in terms of the way in which we kind of like forge materials and kind of make products and kind of can create benefit and advancement. So last week we talked about the art of finding what needs to be said, meaning not just should you appreciate and understand the necessity of criticism, you should strive to be good at it. Julie is a brilliant writer, but Julie also said that one of the things that's also important is like someone can be seen as a brilliant reader, meaning that the books that you read in itself say a lot about who you are. The work that you admire says a lot about who you are. It in itself is an art. So I've come to to feel that like in a world where we have social liberties like America, we have the right to say whatever we want. And I think that's really important because we have an existential freedom that puts us in circumstance where we're always being forced to find our path. That ontological necessity is something that benefits from having greater social liberty. So the greater social liberty of allowing us to say to the greatest extent what we feel is our benefit. And the way that works is it allows us then to manufacture that into the things to kind of help us with that existential reality. So our adventurous imaginations and the people who find themselves on these kind of speculative kind of frontiers, those people with the adventurous minds and adventurous imaginations, these are the people who kind of like can't help themselves but find themselves here. And they don't want to be anywhere else. So as a result, that's where we find ourselves. So criticism is our roadmap, and discernment is what helps us read that map. And as a result, we see the necessity of that. So being keen in this regard is of utmost importance. Being able to find what needs to be said is, I believe, a greatly underappreciated ability, and is something that also starts to make me feel that there's an indication that there's a societal concern. There's a concern with the society that doesn't appreciate this. In a society that puts such an onus on the importance of science and technology and technique related to reason, criticism becomes an essential thing. And the ability to have the discernment to understand the depth and the value or lack of value of observations is absolutely essential. I don't understand, I keep hearing other people say other things about, well, maybe you can do these things other ways. I don't know one. If there is one, kind of, I'd love to hear what it is. I mean, I don't believe in ESP or telepathy or visions or, kind of like kind of signs from creators and things like that. I'm a rational individual as much as I know in my conscious mind. My unconscious is a mess like everyone else's, but as a result, I put a tremendous amount of, and I'll use the word faith, and faith is the word, in my conscious discernment as regards skepticism and criticism. So let's see what we have. We have a situation where we've established, or at least I've tried to establish, the necessity, the essential nature of this occupation, this activity, and then honing it as a skill so that there's actually an art form, just like painting, just like drawing, just like model building, just like sculpting, just like making music, just like writing, just like reading, is criticism, observation, the ability to say what needs to be said as the most depth of consequence regarding any particular circumstance. That is something we should strive to become as best as we can be at that. As I've said in the past, the greatest form of respect one can pay to any individual who does any kind of speculative endeavor is to give them the benefit of your observation. I think it's an honor to have people of consequence ask you for your opinion. And I think you owe them the respect to give them the best that you can. So here's a quick story through how this goes for me. I grow up in a anti-intellectual environment where everything is emotional and kind of visceral and kind of like abusive intellectually. But I realized that I have a certain kind of curiosity and a certain kind of like rationality where I can kind of reason my way to kind of safety. So I actually found that my ability to not be overwhelmed by the emotional circumstance led me to realize there's a tremendous value in seeing the way to think myself through circumstance and could outwit and outmaneuver people who meant me harm. So I saw the ability to kind of, what's the term they've used? It's really funny. It's like, kind of like, work smart, not hard. No, I think that there's a good combination in working smart and hard at the same time, but work smart first. So anyway, you have this circumstance where I started to realize the benefit of that. So when I came to architectural school, even as that kind of like somewhat detached and kind of like alienated individual in terms of like the speculative endeavors, I found that when I started to appreciate the value of an architectural education, because I realized that being an architect was what I really truly wanted to do. And next week we'll start to talk about the natures of that as architecture as a verb, and then drawing in towards an organic architecture was the specific nature of the work that I do. So as a result, I find myself coming to these circumstances where I kind of see that this allows me to kind of very quickly sift through this incredibly kind of like overwhelming body of information that I'm basically kind of introduced to. And as a result, I kind of see the incredible value of being able to take advantage of the observations that people made regarding my work as a result of my inexperience and learning of the basic nature of my craft. So I came to see I could have people come and see things that I hadn't seen that were of great consequence, tremendous consequence. In fact, that still kind of goes with me to this very day. And in fact, the reason why Julie, again, is the most brilliant person in my world is that she saw an incredibly deep insight into my work that was able to kind of like release me from something where I was pretty much spinning my wheels. I had an impulse for an organic aspect, for an organic desire in my work as an architect. But Julie was the person who kind of really kind of gave me the structural observation, the perspective that allowed me to kind of really engage it in the way that it needed to be. So, and I will never forget that. It was the most valuable thing anyone has ever kind of given me in my entire life. It kind of, I don't know how long it would have taken me to come to that conclusion. I was working in that direction, but Julie, at the very least, saved me 2 decades of wasted time, or at least accelerated my development. So having that is something that I see in the terms of, like I said, anyone who does any kind of engages in any kind of speculative activity benefits from this. So now here's the problem. I, as a student and as a young professor, because I transitioned very quickly from student to professor, I was kind of like moving in. A lot of times it was like still in my, early to mid 20s when I was kind of sitting on review panels of different architects. Sometimes this different architectural students, sometimes the students were older than me, which was, kind of fairly common, but it was something I kind of came to become used to. I started to see reluctance and resentment and hostility and all kinds of uh, concerns with people having to receive criticism, and kind of their emotional, I'll say their emotional frailty was not allowing them to kind of take the nutritional benefit, the nourishment that was being provided in the information that was being given. So I even remember I was on a panel discussion and a kind of fairly, I was on a panel discussion I think it was 1990, in a fairly well-respected architectural school in London, probably the premier architectural school in Britain. And I remember, that one of the topics was that they were kind of transitioning from criticism in their final review process to more of what they would kind of call an opening. So it was like they were having more of these kind of gallery openings of kind of like chit chatty little people kind of like saying kind of silly little things in the corner, and, the kind of like cult personality things. And I just thought to myself, this is a fairly well respected school. This is a place where, Prince Charles and the Queen and, like, other people have come to see, is like, I'd say it was like, uh, anyway, but the point was, there was this idea where there was almost this sense of real, like, that criticism was some kind of nostalgic, sentimental relic of a past society. And I was like thinking to myself, yeah, I know, it was crazy.
I would call that cheese an anti-progression.
So anyway, I kind of made this statement that I said, guys, the ability, we do not ever grow beyond the ability to take the benefit of the assessment of other people as regards our work. And it was not like anyone really could counter that, as much as they just didn't want to deal with that. And I still stand by that statement. Students, architects, scientists, no one is at the point where they understand something without the benefit of a critical observation of someone with a very valuable perspective on the circumstance. So this was, I think, 1990. Now, I remember, often hearing people like, "Oh, he didn't like me. I hate him. He's a terrible professor." Why? He didn't like my project. The idea is not that they like or dislike your project. The idea is they're trying to assess and give you consequential feedback. So this is in architecture, and I saw it directly myself in architecture, engineering, and art, because these are the places where I kind of like was on reviews on panels. And I thought to myself, this is just not good. And over time, I've seen this only become a larger problem. I, as a result, went from being a person who felt like everyone should love criticism. I make it all the time. Don't you guys love me? And that didn't work. So no, it didn't. Yeah, I know, you're not surprised, because you were thought, I mean, again, I'm naive. I don't know. I thought, hey, this is this is, like I said, this is essential.
Architecture school.
Yeah. And there were places that were more reluctant and other places were outright hostile. But what I did was then I started to temper that only to when I was being paid to do it. If I was paid to kind of be on a panel, or if I'm giving a lecture or whatever, I would do that. And if it was people who would come and then ask me for it. So I felt, okay, look, you've invited me. But what I've seen now, which is even more disturbing, is that even in those places where you are invited and that your expertise is basically sought after, we've come to a position where we now caution the critic to be concerned about the feelings of the individuals more than the way in which the depth and value of the information is conveyed. Now, again, like I said, criticism was the wild, wild west when I was, kind of coming around. And like I said, I saw it as a defense mechanism that I used. It was a sword I wielded against my foes. So I kind of felt really comfortable and enjoyed having this skill save my life. But at the same time, I realized there were people who, did mean me harm. And I kind of felt like, I could separate the difference between the intent and the information. And that was, for me, I never really cared about the intent. The intent was always, I don't trust anyone. But if someone says something valuable, I'm best to heed that advice. I remember kind of once, like I had a hockey coach and he goes like, your stick work is for shit. And I realized like, he's probably right, man. It's like, it's not like my stick work is the best part of my game. And I realized, he's telling me the truth. And he did it to hurt my feelings because he was yelling at me. And he kind of like, I think he threw a water bottle at me too.
Married you for your stick work.
Sorry. So I was like, okay. So and it's like, I realized, this might kind of like, because I was relied on other parts of my game and I never really paid enough attention to that. And I said, maybe let's work on that a bit. So it was actually valuable information. So, but I didn't get hurt by the truth. I realized like this guy's, but I, was like, yeah, this guy yelled at me and he's mad at me, but it wasn't because he really, maybe he wanted me to be a better player, or maybe he was just mad because I had just made a mistake and kind of got us in trouble. It's like, but it was like, whatever the circumstances were, that was the truth. My stick handling was not the best part of my game. And it was something I should work on. So the point is, my concern now is, and there's always this idea, well, if you told it the right way, they're like, okay, guys, look, there are ways that I find is an excuse to say, there's never any way you can tell me what I need to hear. And I find that just a kind of like a coward's way out. So in that case, if you feel that someone is saying something to you that individual feels has benefit, you can look at yourself and say, like, hey, did I do this to hurt this person's feeling? Or did I tell this because I really thought that this was what this person needed to do to develop this project? And I look at it, it's like, okay, I might be a very mean-spirited, malicious guy, and I'm just doing this to hurt people's feelings. That's possible. But I don't believe that, because I really believe I do bet, I enjoy, right, that feeling. And maybe this is the selfish part of me. So this might be the justification. I'm justifying my selfishness as an excuse for why I do it. I enjoy when other people say, oh, that was insightful. There's that feeling you get when you can do that. It is an incredibly respected thing when someone can go into a room and basically kind of cut through everything and say, that's the point. And everybody's like, whoa. That is the thing that, I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head, because you've made a persuasive demonstration of an illustration regarding something of consequence that no one else had seen, but they understand once you've seen it. Yeah, that's good. So for me, I always use that as my guide when I kind of had, when people would gasp, or there would be this sense of like, ooh, and then you could see, oh, let's follow up on this. I think we have something here. To me, maybe my own selfishness was what saved me. I know that like selfishness is a bad word sometimes, but I've never seen it. I've never seen selfishness as bad, and I've never seen modesty as good. So, in that regard, this is where we are. So, I believe that criticism not only has receded from the public sphere, it is even receding from those rarefied places in our society where it still was viewed or alleged to be viewed as the essential pillar in support of technology, science, technique, and reason. When the philosophy students, when the mathematical students, when the biology students, when the architects, the engineers, and the artists dispense with criticism because it becomes too much of an emotional burden, we have lost our way. In the street, you know, the realm of the public intellectual, where I feel comfortable, on social media and places like that, it still should be revered. It should still be important, but we shy away from it. We shy away from it. But now I see that not only has it happened to the point where, uh, like, it's not the kind of thing that anyone kind of looks out for. People look to get away from it. But the thing that's kind of like, ah, itchy nose, is that I see now it receding to the point where we are looking to find a way to keep it out of those places where it's absolutely essential. So that pillar that I talked about of the relationship between technology and science, or technique and reason, will be a different unbreakable bond. There's even people who are lobbying for the ideas of going back to a more primitive relationship where we have technique related to superstition or ritual, or, and I'm thinking, we realized the rain dance was stupid.
I'm sorry.
We realized that sacrificing virgins for was just really evilly stupid.
Now
It was
throwing all of my rain dance. Sorry.
and I just painted that circle for you. So, I mean, honestly,
That's so funny.
aside from the people I know who kind of like keep trying to put curses on me, I mean, they don't seem to be working. I seem to just make it look up like the ceiling's not collapsing. Seems to be working. I mean, it's like, but anyway, no. So I think that my point here is this unbreakable bond between criticism and discernment and judgment, skepticism, is in danger in our society. And we're looking to replace a valuable unbreakable bond that has allowed us to come from the Middle Ages, from the Dark Ages, to the ability to kind of fly in space and land on other planets, to the point where we're starting to kind of go back to the point where we want to kind of take apart this and replace it with something that's less effective, which to me is just absurd. Now, how long would it have taken us to reach the moon by technique and technology related to ritual and superstition? Don't know if we would ever have gotten there, right? Navigation and all these other things that we kind of found out as a result of kind of taking technology and science and putting them together. I don't know if we would ever have figured these things out. We certainly wouldn't have kind of gotten as quickly as we did. I mean, to kind of go from places where things just kind of were just transformed overnight. Now, again, this is completely separate than a moral issue, because I still feel that the moral component is something that needs to be worked on separately. I don't believe we're morally superior than any of the other kind of circumstances, but we're technologically superior. Does that cause certain problems? Absolutely. But the reality is to undo this and to replace it with something less effective is just it's just absurd. I mean, I often use, and I use this as a kind of result of things that have kind of happened here in New York City, which is what I call change without progress. So someone can make change is inevitable in nature. Change happens in society. The relationship between change and progress are two very important things. I can change the way I move things around on my desk. Does it make my desk more efficient and make me more effective? I don't know. I have to be able to tell the difference. So, what I like is being able to discern a value and a consequence as a result of new actions. So, we have seen and we have, just like this architectural school felt as if they had felt that, like, having like catty little kind of like cult of personality conversations, with a glass of wine was going to help people learn how to become better architectural students or better artists or better sculptors, which I thought was just patently absurd because, you know, uh, I never went to a gallery opening to kind of like there's a difference between going to a gallery opening and going to a lecture. Now, I'm not saying that a gallery opening, you won't meet people who are very bright and very capable, but it's a difference than sitting down and looking at work and kind of like talking about it rather than kind of chatting about like, you don't like her and like she doesn't like him and he cheated on her and I can't believe he's sleeping with the dean kind of bullshit. And that's what I think is the circumstance that we're kind of dealing with now, is that like there's a movement away from discernment. And I think part of that, the way I see it is we fear genius. We fear genius and we kind of give too much we give too much consequence, we give too much time to the rabble. There's always going to be people who resent those people who work harder, who are more talented, who achieve. And there's always going to be people who resent the people who just want to go their own way. And I find that right now, genius is under assault. And I think that's the reason behind some of these other things. Now, again, we'll probably go into that more in detail. But for me, anyone who attacks criticism basically is fearful of it. So for me, that's the kind of thing that I look towards as this kind of societal decay. This is a valuable, unbreakable bond that is basically being stressed. And just the same way that, you have forensics where you go in and you kind of evaluate a circumstance and find out what went wrong. This to me is a way of kind of testing our structural capabilities. This is what looking at, the beams and saying like, I don't know if this buckling is something we should concern ourselves with, or we need to kind of assess this right away. We need to kind of get in here and look at this. So I find that this is an indicator. The way in which criticism has receded and has been assailed, in my estimation, is an indicator of a kind of a retrograde aspect of society, and it's a concerning thing for me. So, on that incredibly positive note, let me kind of make a transition to next week. Next week, I'm going to be talking about architecture as a verb. And that's the title. It's very simple. It's very fun. It's something I've kind of like felt like, and it's kind of like a break, but it actually, the previous two groups of lectures or talks, build on that, the idea of the metaphor and the idea of criticism. Now we're going to basically kind of go into my particular ideas, the things that kind of lead towards what I call an organic architecture. So anyway, I think this was good. I think I put a lot of pieces together. Hopefully, I think that these pieces were fairly clear. So as we kind of like end up, as always, let me just say in closing, the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to all of our benefit to keep it exactly this way. Thank you.